Alright, the Bryce Huff news was definitely unexpected, but thanks to Howie Roseman completing one of the best trades ever, the Eagles are in an incredible spot. In fact, so much so that given the extra cap room and open roster spots, the names on the Birds' radar are certainly worth a look. In this video, we'll break down some of those better fits for Philly, along with some exciting standouts from week 1 of OTAs and everything else around the Eagles. But first, let's run it. What's up, guys? So let's face it, the biggest domino for the Eagles dropped, and now everything just got real. Of course, I'm obviously referencing the Bryce Huff trade after Adam Schefter broke the news that Philly traded the San Francisco 49ers for a mid-round pick. Because even though you and I would have been okay for scraps to move on from Agent Zero, Howie Roseman always tries to maximize his value.
Greed, for lack of a better word, is good.
Alright, we probably owe some thanks to Joe Douglas for getting this thing done too, because remember, he spent 3 years with Robert Saleh there in New York with the Jets. As the GM took a liking to Bryce Huff, and then the head coach followed suit after the undrafted free agent was brought in 2020. Of course, it did take the Memphis alum several seasons to find his footing. But in 2023, it all came together as he was one of the most efficient and productive pass rushers, registering 10 sacks, leading to Saleh to compare Huff to legendary Yankees pitcher Mariano Rivera for his closing ability. AKA, Saleh felt like if you needed a pressure or sack in high-leverage moments, then Bryce Huff was your guy. Granted, in Philly, it was an entirely different story, and that may be a little bit too much praise for a guy like Bryce Huff. However, either way, just knowing how much Saleh was a fan of Agent Zero was no doubt an advantage for Joe and Howie when they called up the 49ers defensive coordinator.
I'm making you a deal. Do you want this deal?
Look, even after having time to sleep on it and come to terms with it, I'm still actually kind of in denial of this thing actually taking place. Because somehow the Eagles were able to get it done, and that's even with the fact that I brought this idea up nearly 2 weeks ago, suggesting a call to Robert Saleh would make some sense. It's just that I never anticipated for these types of terms. Because come on, the writing was on the wall for how little he was valued.
You want him? We don't even want him. You want him?
Seriously, how are you feeling about this move? And maybe more importantly, the question is, how do you think it impacts the next move for Howie Roseman or what he has planned? Okay, while you're letting me know that in the comments, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Because we are so close to 130,000 subscribers in just over 2 years since starting this thing. And remember, I'm going to give away this signed Saquon Barkley helmet as soon as the channel gets to 130. So like I said, drop a like, comment, and make sure to sub. Alright, when it comes to the next move, it's important to note the specifics and how it impacts the cap. And I do want to clear it up based on what we initially said in the live stream. Since according to ESPN's Phil Yates, the Eagles appeared to be declining Bryce Huff's $15.58 million fully guaranteed option bonus. The issue is that Yates mentioned it was a $15 million cap savings. But after getting more info from Over the Cap, as well as former front office executive Jake Rosenberg, it's probably more like a $2.5 million number in cap help. Still, the fact that the 49ers were willing to even pay half of the salary is a big help, and at least you're getting back some more space. Plus, when you add that to the credit that Philly's about to get for the Darius Slay and James Bradberry June 1st designations, that's some serious cash.
We're rich!
Hate to break it to you and spoil the party, but Brandon Graham also does need to officially retire, which is probably going to happen in the next few days, and that's going to end up being about a $4.5 million cap hit, so you basically give most of it back. Look, relax, it's still in a $35 to $40 million range in terms of cap space, so if Howie Roseman wanted to make a move, he has all the ammunition he needs. By the way, if you're one of those who had been holding out hope for Bryce Huff, then I feel for you, but I'd also encourage you that we did just end up dodging a bullet. For real, after hearing that Huff hadn't attended any workouts in the spring, nor did he have any intention on showing up for OTAs, the writing was on the wall.
Well, we're going to have to let you go then.
I think we'd all agree that the last thing that we need is someone who's going to bring down the team vibes and also not be totally locked into the team-first mentality. Heck, the dude acted like a total clown after the trade announcement to San Fran by posting a goodbye pic to Philly on his Instagram account. Plus, going back to the Super Bowl interview for why Huff chose the Eagles is pretty telling about where his priorities were.
What was going through your mind entering free agency, and why did you end up choosing Philadelphia?
Honestly, going into free agency, I just want the biggest bag. At the end of the day, like, when you play for pennies on the dollar, coming in as an undrafted rookie, you don't get to sign a bonus. You're playing for rookie minimum. And I just kind of, like, I tried to provide more value than I was being paid back in New York. Like, I wanted to play like a $20 million guy. I wanted to play like one of the top guys in the league, and I feel like I did that, being the most efficient rusher in the league.
Okay, on one hand, I can understand it. At UDFA, you got to make your bag. If that's your main motivation, that's perfectly fine, but it just doesn't necessarily fit for all cultures or for all teams. At the same time, though, this is also not the first time this has happened. Granted, it took a while to come out, but Haason Reddick was also a little too focused on the me versus we aspect before getting traded away. Now, I get that he was sack chasing for a contract, but that just makes me appreciate guys who are willing to sacrifice for the betterment of the team.
Thing about our team last year, like we had so many veteran guys in our locker room. Like I leaned on Avante, because we played the same position, and he taught me just about everything I needed to know about playing the nickel position, and that's when he was starting. Like he was starting, and I'm trying to get on the field and play the same position. And he's still teaching me all these things about how to play the position, which was really cool, and that's a testament to our team, and how close we were last year. And
who you are.
Yeah.
Like, we just want to see people have success.
I'm telling you, I got mad respect for Avonte Maddox, even more so than I had, especially after hearing from Coop. Like, some people may want to write it off as luck, but there's a reason Philly has all kinds of the right guys. I mean, that leadership is infectious, and you can hear it from some of the younger guys about how they're willing to put the team first.
I'm expecting to do what's expected of me, so whatever the team needs to be done, I'll do it.
I love playing football, and if that's where I fit in the defense that I'm in best, and that's where I can make the best impact for our defense, and that's where I'll be. It's really up to the coaches and where they see my best fit within our defense, and if that's inside, then I'll be fine with that.
There's no other way to put it at this point. We are spoiled with the Eagles' culture and the vibes of the team and really just that selfless character. But that's also why I'd be really careful about who the Eagles might possibly add to the roster. Of course, there's a chance that adding a tight end is in play after Jordan Schultz reported that the Atlanta Falcons are actively shopping Kyle Pitts and have had multiple teams reaching out to see what the price would be. For the record, that cost from what the Falcons are saying is likely a day 2 pick. And guess what? If you're a fan of that move, then Philly has currently projected 4 picks on day 2, so the possibility for a trade is certainly there. Although keep in mind that Pitts is entering his final year of his contract and will be a free agent at the end of next season. However, like Anthony DiBona pointed out, the 24-year-old has shown flashes of being an elite tight end at times. It's just that he's been held back by poor offensive schemes and quarterback play. And alright, the blocking leaves a little to be desired at times too. Yet if the price is right and we're talking about maybe a 5th round pick, then he could be worth a chance. I don't know, either way, moving on from Huff created quite the opportunity for what the Eagles could do next. And speaking of opportunities, Anthony DiBona and I are teaming up to give away a signed Nolan Smith rookie card. Granted, this one is via a Twitter or X giveaway, but if you do want to enter, then just make sure to follow both of us on X and tag a friend in our tweet. FYI, I got a link down in the comments and the description if you want to go check out the contest, where we'll draw for the winner next Tuesday night during the live stream. Again, big thanks to the Ant-Man for putting up his autographed card. Also, given the expanded cap room now for Howie Roseman, we hopped on to discuss the various trade possibilities and which player might make the most sense to keep an eye out for.
I don't think that a lot of people saw this coming, quite honestly. Like, Bryce Huff, the trade, that's not, like to just move on from him to trade. I mean, I had it in the 53-man roster projection. I thought that there would be a trade. But to the extent that it is a mid-round pick, and we'll see exactly when those official terms come out, but even if it's a late mid-round pick, however we want to quantify it, to that extent, I didn't see it coming there, and also the 49ers. So talked about it a little bit in live stream previously, but not getting your thoughts publicly besides just some text and some surprises. Howie Roseman doing some work, a little bit of praise for that move.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he was able to get anything in exchange for Bryce Huff was a little bit of a surprise, because in my 53-man roster projection, which is already wrong, unfortunately, because of this move, so I got to take that L. But, I mean, Bryce Huff is gone. He's going to San Francisco, which is a team that we have talked about on the show multiple times, given the connection to Robert Saleh and how he praised Bryce Huff when they were together with the Jets. So clearly that connection was obvious, and maybe this is a move that Saleh kind of begged for in San Francisco, trying to get his guy there. But it is interesting because myself, I thought he was going to stick around simply because of the way his contract was structured and how much money he was owed. But clearly Bryce Huff wanted to be out of there because it was kind of a mutual agreement between both sides to adjust his contract to make the trade work, where the 49ers aren't taking on too much money. But on the flip side, it does allow the Eagles to save, what was it, $2.5 million? There are some conflicting reports about the exact amount, but the fact that they freed up any amount of cap space by moving on from Bryce Huff while also getting a draft pick, it's just a great move for the Eagles, because obviously there wasn't a fit there because things didn't work out last season. Whenever you're a healthy scratch in the biggest game of literally the biggest game possible, kind of the writing was on the wall. It was just a matter of making the money work, which obviously they were able to do.
Yeah, it just tells you a little bit. If you can't play in the Super Bowl, that's and you're being paid the amount that he was. So with him moving on, I believe for the record that Josh Uche is the oldest pass rusher or edge player, pass rusher, whatever, on the Eagles team at 26 years old. So tons of youth in the building. I think it's a positive, promising sign for Vic Fangio and the Eagles. But I mean, the more that you heard about it's so good from so many different reasons. But the fact that, I mean, Bryce didn't show up to any offseason workouts prior to OTAs. No offseason workouts. And you'd think if you're trying to put on a best impression, you'd maybe one or two, just, show face in the NovaCare complex, get some work in. Didn't happen there. Wasn't going to show up for OTAs, obviously, as we learned, but also just in general, the Eagles not having plans. That was very quickly, got that news from Jeff McClain, and then obviously the trade official. But I think that there's so many things you could go back and look at. The writing was on the wall. You listen to some of the interview clips. You hear some of those. Obviously, his instant reaction from his Instagram post once the trade was made official too. This dude was just not right for this locker room. So to be able to move on from it for anything, like you said, is a win. But then you get to recoup a trade. Once again, do we have a little bit of gratitude that we should share with Joe Douglas, perhaps, right? Like, does he deserve maybe a little bit more than we give him credit for? Howie's the mastermind, of course, but connections there with Robert Saleh and getting this thing done.
I mean, there's certainly a possibility that relationship kind of came into play here, because obviously Joe Douglas just recently, reportedly, it's not been officially announced, but he rejoined Philadelphia's front office. Obviously, him and Robert Saleh worked together for years with the Jets, and Bryce Huff was there as well, so maybe he made a phone call, but I feel like that connection was obvious beforehand. And if anybody knows anything about Howie Roseman, he's publicly stated how he always wants to know about any player's availability. He's always going to call teams to check out their interest in their players. It's just he's constantly working the phone. So this is probably something that was talked about for a while. It might have just come down to the fact that June 1st is approaching, because they're going to wait until after June 1st to make the deal official. So the financials of it kind of probably played into a factor, but maybe Joe Douglas had a role in it. But more so, I think this is already kind of set in stone. Maybe he kind of just helped it inch over the finish line.
Well, either way, however it got done, thank you to Howie, to Joe Douglas, whoever was in play. The fact that take advantage of Robert Saleh, which I will say, we recorded a video just to, pat ourselves on the back a little bit. And I mentioned this earlier in the video as well, but we did talk about the Eagles might have an insane idea up their sleeve. So, like I say, it's not the craziness of Bryce Huff moving on. It's just, I think, for what the actual trade value was, and that the Eagles save some cash, more long-term ramifications. If you've not already, Jake Rosenberg and others, kind of more details on the specifics of the cap hit and what that means. So it's a little bit of space. It's not anything crazy, but it does still have an opportunity for the Eagles now to maybe go out and make a move. Well, what does Howie Roseman do next that you see in your mind?
So obviously, it feels like the first thing that everybody was looking towards, especially when that first reported number of $15 million and of freeing up $15 million in cap space. Everybody was like, so I got a ton of mentions on Twitter where people were like, does this mean that they're going to trade for Trey Hendrickson or TJ Watt? And obviously those names are certainly interesting, because of the Eagles, they're clearly in a Super Bowl window where they want to win now. Those are two of the best pass rushers in the NFL that are readily available, it seems like, or want new contracts. So there are trade rumors around their name. So if Howie Roseman does want to take a big swing, I don't know if he'll necessarily do so, but the fact that these guys do want new contracts, you could always kind of get creative to where in this first year, the contract will be significantly less and kind of backloaded a little bit. So that could happen. I don't completely rule out anything. You know my history with percentages, but I think there are a little bit more realistic targets that they can now use, because now after June 1st, not only are they going to have a free roster spot because of the Bryce Huff trade, but Brandon Graham's retirement is going to finally process. So they'll actually have two open roster spots to work with.
There we go. And Howie does not like to, waste, I suppose, right? Like, you're going to get some of those filled fairly quickly, we would assume. Now, depending on, cap space and how much they want to spend there, which, by the way, just to make a really quick note, because I think some people were asking, or I got some DMs before, James Bradbury, Darius Slay, those play a factor also. June 1st is whenever you'll get the cap savings, if you will, for the June 1st. And it's always odd, because I understand it's like, well, they were gone from the team for forever. So they were gone, but, for people not as well aware, you don't get the savings to the cap until you get to June 1st. So that's like I think it's 6.2 million, somewhere around that range. So they'll get that, but then the Brandon Graham's, I believe, $4.5 million cap hit for this year. So it's just a little bit of freed up space. So you have that, $2.5 million or so, roughly from the Bryce Huff one, but it's still ultimately somewhere in the neighborhood of like 35 million, I believe. Could be off a little bit, maybe a little bit less or more, but potential for others because I don't personally, I think we're both in this similar area. I don't see a like massive blockbuster trade of TJ Watt or Trey Hendrickson. It would be fun if one of those were to happen, but I'm feeling like, I don't know, a little bit lesser. Still an important player, perhaps, but any other names out there on your list?
Yeah, so I don't think the financials of this are really the biggest factor here. I think it's more so the fact that they're going to have 2 open roster spots. And like you mentioned, Howie Roseman, especially because they might be able to bring these guys in for a couple of days of OTAs where they get a little bit of time in with the team before they take that break before training camp. So 2 guys that I would focus on. One is a free agent, one's a trade target. So on the edge now, if you do look at their room, you mentioned that they don't have a ton of experience. They're those older veteran players like a Brandon Graham, like you had last season. So I think one of the guys out there that's still out there on the free agent market is Zadarius Smith, who has played 16-plus games in the last 3 seasons. I know he played split time last season between Cleveland and Detroit, I believe. So, but he's got the size that they're kind of lacking right now in that edge room where he's 6'4", 270 pounds. A lot of the edge players in their room right now are a little bit on the lighter side. They don't have that kind of Brandon Graham stout build that you would really look for. So Zadarius Smith, I think, is a target where I don't think they would necessarily have to break the bank for him. I think he's just looking for the right opportunity. And now that the Eagles kind of have that void of needing an older veteran that can also contribute a little bit, I think Smith would fit well there. And then on the flip side, a trade target that I think is a little interesting, especially in recent days following a report from Jordan Schultz that the Steelers were looking at potentially trading for Jonnu Smith at tight end. Maybe that means a good old Georgia Bulldog, Darnell Washington, could become available. I know he's played primarily as just like a blocker, but he did play, I believe, 52% of the snaps for the Steelers. So he does have a role there, but the fact that they gave Pat Freiermuth a big contract, they did sign Donald Parham Jr. in free agency. They have Connor Hayward, who's kind of a tight end fullback hybrid. And now if they're discussing a trade for Jonnu Smith, maybe that means that Washington could be on the way out. Obviously, the Eagles have a ton of Georgia connections, and maybe he could be in play for maybe a late day 3 pick, early day 3 pick to kind of give them a younger tight end to look forward to with all these current tight ends that are heading into a contract year.
Hey, now that could be something we could be interested in here because we've mentioned it a couple times, and hey, appreciate Grant Calcaterra, pass catching ability, maybe not as much for the blocking. So if you get another player that like a Darnell Washington, I could be enticed depending on what the cost is there. But that is something to keep in mind, to keep an eye out for. So interesting also, though, I will bring up Bryce Huff real quickly because the most important factor to this that comes into play, and I think that we're all going to be curious about, certainly you as the president of the Look Good, Play Good Association, is there's a number up for grabs, and a very important number up for grabs in zero, Agent Zero. Now, some people are superstitious, so it's like maybe retire the numbers. If you're like, don't ever use it again. But DeAndre Swift made it work really well. So it's not like it's completely broken. It just has to have the right player wearing zero. Any thoughts on that? I'm sure you have thoughts, but any favorites for the zero to be worn?
Well, I've unfortunately spent entirely too much time thinking about who's going to be the next one to wear number 0. Obviously,
of course you have.
Maybe it's a little bit of a jinx where it's the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, Bryce Huff didn't have a lot of success, but like you mentioned, DeAndre Swift had basically the best season of his career wearing number 0. So I think maybe it could shift back to the offensive side of the ball. I know a lot of people want to see Jihaad Campbell get rid of number 30 because everybody seems to hate it. I personally like when players can kind of go back and wear the numbers that they wore in college, and he wore number 30 at Alabama. I did also tweet that Drew Makuba wore single digits both at Clemson and Texas, so maybe number 0 would look good for him. But 24 is also a great look for a defensive back. I feel like that's been a number that's followed kind of the greats, and just in the NFL in general, 24 is a really popular number as far as secondary players. And so this is kind of a little bit of a wild card, but maybe Avery Williams goes to number 0. He's going to be kind of playing multiple roles as a returner, receiver, running back. Who knows what he's going to do on offense, and he's going to have a role in special teams. So maybe he'll be a little bit of a lower risk kind of player that could take it, but I don't know. Maybe it's going to come down to whoever wants it, whoever has the most years in the NFL. I don't know. It's going to kind of go by seniority. So we'll see what happens. But like you said, it's definitely an interesting number to watch.
Okay, that's interesting. I like that. I've seen the Drew Makuba and Jihaad Campbell. I think those are the immediate ones from lots of people, even when they had the live stream as soon as the news. But I didn't see too many Avery Williams. I don't know if I even saw any. So keep an eye out there. Everybody in the comments, feel free to let us know who you think. If there's others out there who would be better for Agent Zero, maybe they can live up to the name in a better way, not literally out there of not much to call for as Bryce Huff. Nonetheless, though, you mentioned Avery Williams, so maybe a good segue here. OTAs week 1 is down. We got some takeaways. Very brief, limited sessions because the media is only available to go there every so often. But still, from what we've seen and heard, a couple OTA practices. What were the main takeaways from that first week?
So I'll start with Avery Williams, who we were just talking about. The fact that he wasn't there for the session that was open to the media, I thought that was a little odd because we don't know of any injury that he's necessarily dealing with at this time. Obviously, he could be because he missed the whole season a year ago, but I think maybe it's just it's weird because Nick Sirianni seems so excited about him and his potential role, and so maybe I don't know, they're trying to be secretive and not reveal anything because that could be a very Nick Sirianni move. I feel like is kind of trying to hide his role for as long as possible, but I also think they're going to eventually see him at training camp. You can't hold him out forever, so maybe he just had some type of family function to attend to or something like that. But the fact that he wasn't there at all, and we don't know if there's an injury that was disclosed, so that's one thing to monitor. The next thing would be Andre Sam getting first team reps at safety is kind of a big deal because it seemed, I know Reed Blankenship obviously wasn't there, so that plays a role and kind of bumps everybody up a little bit. But the fact that he got some plays with the first team and apparently made a few plays on the field as well is notable because the Eagles obviously kind of kept him all last season. There was a player that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson seemed to have a close relationship with, and they kind of worked out off the field too. So maybe he's a player to watch that we didn't really give too much attention to as far as being that fourth safety to make the final roster. So maybe Andre Sam deserves a little bit more conversation around his name. And then lastly, I think the fact that Kenyon Green was working as the second team left guard, Tyler's team was the first team right guard. So I don't know if there's much of a competition there because now Trevor Keegan, after working at just left guard last season, he was the second team right guard in the first session of OTOs that was open to the media. So that was a little interesting. But I also know Bo Wolf and I think Zach Berman from PHLY also mentioned that at this time last year, Mekhi Becton was working as the second team left guard. And obviously we all know that he eventually won that starting job at right guard. So maybe he's kind of taking that same pathway, but Kenyon Green only played left guard for the Texans. So maybe they're kind of just, as he's working and learning the offense, kind of keep him where he's comfortable for now. And then once he kind of gets a hold of the offensive scheme and what he has to do, maybe that's when they'll kind of flip him to the right side and see if he could actually compete with Tyler's team. But those three takeaways were probably the biggest ones for me.
Okay. I like that. I mean, it's very early, as you said, so we take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. 1 week of OTAs, still another week of OTAs. They'll have the mini camp, they'll have training camp, so there's some time. But it is interesting, like you say, the fact that you got a guy that a lot of people were thinking maybe you're going to have the competition. Again, perhaps we see it there in training camp, but there's other players even in that right guard spot of, as you mentioned, the Trevor Keegan, and are they going to get some others? Matt Pryor is a name that has been thrown out there of where is he going to end up fitting in that we talked about, I think, at the last recording. Even it's like, hey, it's an outside chance, but some people have thrown out the idea of a Matt Pryor stealing the job somehow and working his way into the right guard position. So one to keep an eye out, but I do like that as far as just, it's the little glimpses that the Eagles give us because that's what we have to work with. Unfortunately, we can't watch like other organizations. It drives me crazy. I do understand it, but it drives me crazy whenever some organizations like, oh, here's all the videos you could possibly want. You can watch and analyze and put pieces together. It's like, here's one practice for 1 week and then take it what you will. So, so far, that is understandable for those being the takeaways. With that being the case, though, I believe there's multiple players that still did improve their stock in your eyes from the brief limited action. Who would those be?
So good job by you because the first player that I'm going to mention in this regard is Matt Pryor because he was actually working with multiple. There were 3 offensive linemen as far as the starters go that didn't participate, and Matt Pryor was the first team left guard with Landon Dickerson being out. So I think that's obviously notable because he has experience with Jeff Stout and he has experience obviously with the Eagles, and the fact that Tyler Steen is getting the first team reps at right guard is kind of expected, but maybe Matt Pryor is going to be the one competing with him and not necessarily Kenyon Green or Trevor Keegan like a lot of us expected. So that was notable to me. And then another guy that filled in for another starter and Lane Johnson was Darian Kennard. He was the first team right tackle. And I feel like a lot of people were focusing on the other guys, all the rookie offensive tackles that they brought in. And we kind of forgot about Darian Kennard because he was never really active last season and he only really played in that Week 18 game. But he's won back-to-back Super Bowls. I know it's kind of a running joke, but the truth is, so maybe he's having some type of impact that we don't realize. But the fact that the Eagles did keep him on the roster and kept him all along in Stoutland University, maybe they are really considering him as the swing tackle that none of us really were accounting for beforehand. And then lastly, this might not be too much of a surprise, but I think it's notable, is that Adoree Jackson was the first cornerback up across from Quinyon Mitchell when they did go in nickel defense and the 7-on-7 drills. Obviously, later on, he rotated in with Kelee Ringo, and they kind of both split first-team reps. But Adoree Jackson kind of getting the nod over Kelee Ringo to start is kind of notable, because I know he's the veteran, but he is new to Philadelphia. He's new to Vic Fangio's defense, and I wasn't necessarily expecting them to give him the first shot. I thought Kelee Ringo would get the first shot, and then Adoree Jackson would kind of have to steal it from him. But they're splitting time right now, and we'll see how things change heading into training camp.
Maybe Darian Kennard, going back to that real quick, maybe it's the fact that, Jalen Hurts, he needs somebody to play pool with, right? Because that's one of the consistent players, at least according to, I think it was back in the playoffs whenever Jalen revealed that he's won maybe multiple games against Darian Kennard. So he needs somebody to stay there. But in all seriousness, I think it is. They're looking for the swing tackle. You don't have Patrick Johnson, so you got to have somebody. And it is, as we'll continue to say a million different times, but it's early. But the fact that they're getting the reps like that, it's certainly worthwhile. You keep your eye on that one. But then I also try to think of this like similarly for the Adoree Jackson and Kelee Ringo. Like, we had seen and heard all the reports of like the Eagles believe in Kelee Ringo, and not to say that they don't, like, but that they believe in Kelee Ringo. And I was thinking the same thing. Surely, why would you not just, okay, hey, Kelee Ringo is going to start out with the first team because he's been here. It's the next progression. Adoree Jackson is the newcomer. He's coming in to learn. I get the whole veteran part, but at some point, you gotta see those reps. He's getting those in. Kelee was with the first team, like you said, they're rotating back and forth. But yeah, it's something at least worthwhile, because I would have anticipated it being like vice versa. If you're going to eventually get some reps, hey, let's at least start out Kelee there. But it is OTAs. It's a different story if we're late into training camp. We're like, well, there's Adoree Jackson still out there with the first team. He's the starting lineup, so something's going on. I don't know if there's the belief there, the impact. A lot of people have thrown this comment. We talked about it at the last live stream. Seeing that has left some, nervy comments or some anxiety, and Jalen Ramsey is immediately thrown out there. Does any of that come into play with the Bryce Huff, the limited cap space that they have increased now? More likelihood for a Jalen Ramsey trade based on any of that?
I just don't see it happening. I know it's fun to talk about, it's fun to think about, but the fact that Jalen Ramsey essentially publicly bashed Vic Fangio and his fit in Miami when he was there, it just doesn't seem like they literally just pretty much gave up on Bryce Huff because he wasn't much of a fit both on the field and seemingly off the field, because he didn't show up for voluntary OTAs. I saw people mention that he wasn't at the Super Bowl parade. Like, clearly he wasn't happy in Philadelphia, and I don't think bringing the player that was clearly disgruntled working with Vic Fangio in Miami to Philadelphia and trading compensation and giving him a ton of money, it just doesn't make much sense. If they do want to add somebody in the secondary, I think it would probably be more at safety, where obviously guys like Justin Simmons and Julian Blackmon have been players that we've talked about for months at this point, and Justin Simmons has basically publicly campaigned to join the Eagles. So maybe now that they have 2 open roster spots, he's finally going to be signed, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be a Jalen Ramsey play for the Eagles.
We're in agreement on that. We'll continue to say the same thing. So unfortunately, apologies to those of you, because I know there's some in the comments. I know there's people hanging out here. And if you get it right and Jalen Ramsey comes over, then I will very, very cautiously, optimistically try to view that one. But I've also said that it's very important for this locker room culture, and Howie's been very selective. Not that he couldn't be a difference maker, but you got to be careful with this roster and the makeup of the team. You got a lot of selfless players. You called it out on a tweet earlier this week of Cooper DeJean, Jalyx Hunt, just their comments in the press. Like, they're super young players, but they get it. Like, they're locked in of what other team needs you to do. And I think sometimes we get spoiled by that, because that's just kind of the MO for almost everyone on this roster. But it's when you see a guy like Bryce Huff and you go, that's not exactly the same mindset. And again, there's nothing wrong with chase your bag. Like he said, I was going after the biggest bag possible. Why'd you come to Philly? Biggest bag possible. Okay, that's fine. There's some motivation for that. I get it. But there's still a team aspect of it. And sometimes I don't think we hear it from certain players. So for me, Jalen Ramsey, not necessarily worth a distraction. That's at least where I'm at. But we'll see. Hey, Maybe they view it differently and say, let's go ahead and make a move. I don't know.
Yeah, in my mind, if they were going to if they were going to trade for a guy like Jalen Ramsey, why wouldn't you just pay Darius Slay? Because it seemed like he was loved by a lot of players in the locker room. He played really well last season. Obviously, they ended up letting him go. But if they were going to pay a significant amount of money to a cornerback that was a little bit on the older side, I would think they would just keep Darius Slay instead of taking the hit and making him a June 1st, like post June 1st release, and then trading a draft pick or two for Jalen Ramsey. That just wouldn't make sense in my eyes.
That's actually a really good point too. Yeah, you're like almost paying double at that point. So you could just kept Slay here. So we'll see. We'll keep everybody posted. Obviously, if anything happens, everything there. But getting back to OTAs real quick too, we're talking about the players that increase their stock. I was going to bring up Will Shipley and just thoughts or anything that you saw from that. I know that he was getting what it sounded like quite a bit of passes thrown his way, and we've talked about the impact that he could have in the running game, the potential RB2. I know some people debate that and go, well, A.J. Dillon, maybe not. Jimmy Kimsky has A.J. Dillon as a potential cut candidate, quite honestly, and did a video not too long ago about that. But Will Shipley seems like so far, very early on, but so far a good backup to Saquon, obviously, but a good focal point and maybe able to kind of solidify with that Kenny G role.
Well, it felt like last year there was he showed a lot of flashes, whether it was making plays on special teams or he had that long run, obviously, where he was tackled short and then he ended up getting in. But he had I think it was Nick Gates had the penalty that called back his first, what would have been his first career touchdown run. So he's shown flashes whenever he was given reps last season, and now it's just like building on it. I feel like we're both on the same page as far as thinking he's going to be RB2 in Philadelphia. They drafted him relatively early last year for a reason and kind of stashed him and worked him in behind Kenny Gainwell. But now looking like at him as the Kenny Gainwell replacement, I think he offers a little bit more explosiveness than Kenny Gainwell does. I think he offers more as a receiver than Kenny Gainwell does. And obviously, like you mentioned, the OTA reports were saying how involved he was in the passing game. And if you just look at last season, he averaged 8.8 yards per reception. I think he only had 4 catches, but 2 of his 4 catches went for a first down. Whereas Kenny Gainwell only had 16 receptions all season, averaged just 7.1 yards per reception for his career, and didn't really offer as much juice as I think Will Shipley will as both a runner and a receiver.
I'm excited to see it. We'll just say that. Will Shipley with the backup, and Saquon's talked about him in a couple different press conferences. So hype for him. We wish Kenny G well, obviously, within Pittsburgh, but you move it on there. I do think that it's a Will Shipley, his job to lose with RB2, and looking forward to it because he should get a lot of. Honestly, he'll get a lot of work because Saquon's going to, preseason, probably not going to play at all. So, you have Will Shipley out there. Maybe not a ton, even if being RB2, but you'll get more because he's going to be the main focal point of the offense. But definitely worthwhile. So, any other noteworthy items or things from OTAs, just you take away or anything like that?
So, once again, another guy that you just mentioned. So, you're pretty good at this hosting thing. But wow. A.J. Dillon was actually practicing. So, obviously, considering that he had to be out all of last season, that's notable that he was actually on the field. Wasn't working as a second-string running back, but he was practicing, so that's important. And it kind of makes me think because obviously at this position, Will Shipley seems to have the early edge, at which we all kind of expected. Then you talk about Darian Kinnard getting the first-team reps. I mean, with Lane Johnson out, but he was getting the reps over a guy that they added this offseason in Kendall Lamb, who had a ton of experience on the offensive line. So, but then you go back to Adoree Jackson getting those reps over Kelee Ringo. So at 2 other positions, you have the younger guy getting reps immediately ahead of the veteran that was brought in this offseason. Yet Kelee Ringo wasn't. So it's just that's something that I'm still going to monitor. It's a little bit odd. And then speaking of that, getting first-team reps, Lewis Cine, who was obviously added later in the season last year, they carried him on the roster throughout the playoffs. Everybody talks about him because of the Georgia connection. Him getting some reps as a first-team safety is notable and definitely something to keep an eye on because it seems like there's a legitimate competition for that 4th safety spot on the roster. Maybe they make it really difficult and the Eagles are forced to keep 5 safeties, but we'll see what happens. It's going to be a fun position to watch.
They're not going to give it to anybody easily. It's going to have to be earned, which is good, right? All the competition, but it is interesting, right? Because we talk about a lot of different guys, and Andre Sam and Lewis Cine. Like, we'll be honest, Lewis Cine gets brought up more than Andre Sam in almost any other conversation, comment, Reddit boards, like everywhere that I've looked around. It's Lewis Cine, like the Philly dog, and maybe he can turn things around, maybe he can live up to the hype, all the other stuff. But Andre Sam is not a look hardly at all, right? It's just behind those others. And Andrew DeCecco, I think, had him as a sleeper and underdog to make a roster spot. So, some people they keep an eye, but it's very noteworthy. First team reps. And I do like the point that you made. I just haven't thought about that one, but I like the point you made of other guys who've been here getting those first team reps versus the difference of Kelee, Ringo, and Dory Jackson. So it's still something to monitor. Something interesting there. Philly dogs are going to get looks. Speaking of one Philly dog, though, Nakobe Dean was on the field, not getting in reps or drills or anything like that. Still a ways to go, obviously, for the rehab. But promising signs. We talked to him whenever at the visit on, I guess, almost a week ago now, but at the visit at the Novacare Complex. And I appreciate the optimism. I don't know necessarily, but he said 1.5 months is the goal, the hope. Obviously trying to get ready for day one, but 1.5 months is talked about before training camp. That I so hope that happens. I just, torn patellar tendon, that would be crazy fast if we were able to come back. But either way, he's on the field, so positive sign, continue to move in the right direction for Nakobe Dean.
Yeah, I've mentioned it before. I think the fact that Nakobe Dean is heading into a contract year is going to motivate him to get out there as soon as possible, because obviously he saw them draft Jihaad Campbell in the first round, and they signed Zach Bond to an extension, so he might feel like kind of the odd man out at this point. But the fact that they were moving Cooper DeJean outside in the base defense, I do wonder that when Jihaad Campbell and Nakobe Dean are both healthy, maybe will we see more base defense, because Jihaad Campbell does have a bit of that coverage ability. So does Zach Bond. So would they feel a little bit more comfortable kind of having those three linebackers on the field together? I think that would be something interesting to watch, because obviously they only played their base defense, 15% of the snaps last season or something like that. But now if you have three legitimate starting caliber linebackers that have versatile skill sets as far as being able to blitz, dropping coverage, things like that, that would be really fun to watch. I think the possibilities are kind of endless with those three on the field together. But at the same time, it's just today's NFL, you kind of need to be in nickel defense a majority of the time. So I feel like Nakobe Dean's going to want to be back there as soon as possible and say, listen, I had a great year last year. I'm ready to go for training camp this year. Don't discount me so fast. Maybe Jihaad Campbell stays out on the edge or fills in kind of a rotational role in his first year, and Nakobe Dean is still able to get those starter reps. But he's kind of, like you said, he's being a little bit too optimistic, I think, in my eyes. I think ideally he starts on the pup and they kind of play it slow. But heading into a contract year, I wouldn't want to play it slow either. I would want to be out there as soon as possible.
Don't blame him. That's for sure. Do not blame at all. I hope that it happens. We certainly do. It's not like we're rooting against him, but to get back on the field, get those reps in. Cam Jurgens was also another guy just to make mention of. People questioning, or you see guys out there, are they getting practices, whatnot. Cam Jurgens was there at practices, but he's being held out naturally because of the back surgery that he had. No reason to force anything. Let's make sure he's all right, 100%. Get back to health, which he should. He did say no major concerns. It's progressing as it should. Should be perfectly fine for training camp. So just no reason to force it, obviously, because you know what you got in Cam Jurgens. And, you talk about a 1-year difference of move from right guard to center for one season, get the bag that he did. So, again, congratulations to him. But, got beef jerky for quite a while. So good for him.
Yeah, absolutely. That's just the Eagles kind of protecting their investment because, like you said, they paid him such a hefty contract extension this offseason. Everybody kind of knows what every starter in the offensive line outside of Tyler Steen, you kind of know what you're getting with those guys. They're all proven starters at this point. So there's no need for them to kind of be on the field, especially in OTAs when they're coming off a major surgery like Cam Jurgens is. So I wouldn't be too concerned about him. That's just the Eagles, like I said, protecting their investment.
As they should. Also, I'll throw this out here. Very limited details, not anything officially confirmed, but there may be a collab with Beef Jerky coming soon. So on the topic of Cam Jurgens, just keep an eye out for it. We can't say it's official yet, but
Brian Windhorse fingers.
It's maybe. Okay, so just wait. But you see that you've got to do something with all the push on, the tush push, everything else. Beef Jerky, the contract. We could have some fun with it. Let's just say that. So we're in the works potentially. So stay tuned. Make sure, as always, Anthony's the best, but be following Anthony at DiBona NFL. And if you want to give me a follow too, that'd be great. The PHI special. The reason that I bring that up this one time is, as I mentioned earlier in the video here, but again, I'll just reiterate, if you want to get in on a giveaway for a Nolan Smith signed rookie card, like I have, you could create a burner if you want. Well, but you should just follow these accounts. Got a link in the description, got a link in the comments. You can go check it out. You just got to comment there. Make sure you follow us, of course, but then comment there, tag one of your friends, and you'll be entered. We'll be drawing for that one on the Tuesday night live stream. So kudos and shout out to Anthony for offering up the signed rookie card there, the Nolan Smith one. And I don't know. I can neither confirm nor deny if I've also entered the contest.
I'm just excited that people are kind of liking the trading card giveaways or sports card giveaways that I've been doing because I kind of love the hobby, and then maybe this will help kind of somebody else start their collection or something like that. And people seem to like it, so I think there's gonna be more of that to come.
Heck yeah. I maybe I what no. I'm not gonna win it. Just to there's some people are gonna be like, oh, what do you no? I'm just it's joking. So come on, I won't actually. But it's not a better one, or not very much better to start with a Nolan Smith. People know that I would say that. So good luck to everybody. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, your takeaways from OTAs, everything else that we talked about here. We can agree to disagree, respectfully, of course. But Anthony, blast as always. And for everybody else, make sure to like, subscribe, tune in the next time. We'll see you guys. Go Birds.